Alright, so I'm going to just do this in video format because there's a lot to go over and it's probably something that is useful to more than one person, so this is probably the most efficient use of time, but I figured going over various sword and shield skill trees for war, and part of the reason it's useful is that whenever someone asks for a sword and shield skill tree, there's really like 4 or 5 depending on where you're playing. The big thing being that both of these ultimates are good, but you only want or need one person in your group with leadership. So if you have two, that's kind of a waste, and having the other one kind of makes it really useful in that one person can protect the other when things are going really wrong. Sometimes one person with a defensive formation can hold their shield and sort of near someone who's under a lot of trouble, if that makes sense. So the two skills that you generally always want as a kill squad player with sword and shield is Leaping Strike and Shield Rush. And it kind of should come as no surprise that those are the two abilities that give you the most mobility. Like Leaping Strike is a gap closer, but you generally want to save it as an escape tool. So obviously that's just super useful and valuable, and you don't want to leave that on the table. But aside from that, Shield Rush, the sort of two things about it is that it has grit and it moves you and it catches people. And what I mean by that is because it has grit and it's a mobility skill, you can use it to get out of things like Gravwell and CCs and stuff. You can sort of use Shield Rush in really niche ways that make it really useful. And on top of that, as long as you're playing in a more scattered area when you're taking Shield Bash, Shield Rush, if you hit someone with Shield Rush, following up with a Shield Bash is 100% guaranteed. And once they're bashed and they're stunned, that lets you follow up with whatever else you want to do after that. So that tends to be a very good combo. The reason people don't really take the Defender's Resolve, it's one of these things where it's hard to have an objectively clear answer as to why, but it's just not that useful. It has a really high cooldown and it only lasts for a short amount of time. And once you weapon swap, you sort of lose all of the benefits of that ability. So generally it's not taken. So, okay, so now before it was kind of as a third skill, it was a toss up between Shield Bash and Whirling Blade, depending on whether you are playing more as a CC oriented disruptor or if you were trying to dish out damage. But now you kind of have a third viable option in Upheaval. I think people have been testing it and it seems generally okay. So, we can show you some examples of skill trees. So let's suppose we're taking obviously Leaping Strike and Shield Rush, and we're going to go with a defensive formation kind of tree. It would probably be looking something like this. And between these two, generally the melee one is better. So if you want to take this, I actually think that they buffed one with the shield a lot compared to before. Now it procs things based on being hit, not just blocking, and it gives you different outcomes depending on what kind of shield you are. And the tower shield one is actually kind of good. So if you block, even if you just hold block when you're under trouble, if you just block an attack, you get 20% fortify, which is a lot of armor, and it beefs you up by a ton. So imagine you just block one time when you're in trouble, you get 20% fortify, and now every time you hit or blocked, that 20% fortify gets extended by 5%. That's kind of crazy. So that would be this side of the tree. And the other thing is that as Sword and Shield, probably one thing that players who have played with Sword and Shield before that maybe are not as used to now is that half heavy, which is a heavy attack that's not fully charged, is incredibly good now. They sort of changed the combat script of the game so that the animation is really fast and it has really good tracking. And so up until recently, really good best in slot swords had both Plague Strikes and Trenchant Rend to take advantage of using these half heavies to track and do damage. And every time you do a successful heavy attack, you get 30% of power. So this is crazy good. This used to be good, but now it's not so good. It's only it only lasts for 2 seconds, so it's kind of small. And so it just depends on what steal you want to take next. So suppose I want to take Upheaval, then my tree would probably look like this. I want this haste so that I could chase people a little bit better. So when you're using Leaping Strike, the moment you hit them in the back and you do a crit, you get 20% haste, and then that helps you slow them, chase them, stick them, which is one of the biggest upsides of Sword and Shield, is that it's a really sticky weapon, and you can track on people a lot and follow them. So where would I put the last thing? This is really good. And yeah, it would probably be looking something like this, is a steel tree that I would take if I'm trying to take Upheaval but defensive formation. And if I wanted to take Whirling Blade instead, I would take something like this, or maybe not Tactical Strike. I'm not sure if this is that good, but like one of these three are probably fine. So yeah, and if I wanted to take Shield Bash, then I would probably take something like this. And I would maybe give up one with the shield or defensive training, depending on what my role is, I guess. If I'm playing knowing that I can sort of like cheat on some defensive passives, then I might give this up and play this. Something that looks like that. You kind of want to keep in mind, I mean, this will come with time, but if you know, as long as you know what your role is and you know what group you're playing in and where on the map you're playing in, that gives you an idea of what you're probably going to go against. And over time, that'll give you an idea of what needs to be taken, what is optional, and we can kind of give up. So those are sort of various skill trees that you can take as a Sword and Shield. And now, so alternatively, if you wanted leadership, you would obviously give up a lot of these really good defensive perks. Oh, that's right. I actually think that this is not that good if you're not going to take Shield Bash. You get 15% stamina when hitting with Shield Bash or Shield Rush. If you're only going to take Shield Rush, maybe this is not that valuable. So you can sort of go back to a couple of the trees that I was just showing and give this up and take that instead. But you need this to get to the bottom of this tree. So yeah, sorry about that. So if you're going to take not this side and you want to take leadership, you probably want to give this up, and let's say you're taking Upheaval, and then I would probably take Opportunist over Confidence. Like, Confidence is really good for wide fight because it's very scattered and people generally will leave you alone, and if you can stay at full health, then this is good. But between these two, this is the better damage perk. Precision is kind of, it's good if you're trying to play to it, like proccing haste off of crits a lot. But this is also really good. Like, a perfectly viable option is to take this to pair with how good your heavy attacks are. So something like this would be a reasonable tree if you're trying to take Upheaval and take leadership. And alternatively, if you're trying to take Whirling Blade, it would look like something like that. So you can tell that there's a lot of things that are like interchangeable, like this could be interchanged with that, but you can also tell that there's some core things that you do need or want to take, and you can sort of massage things around. So anyways, hopefully that gives you an idea of like why it's not easy to answer the question of like, here's this tree that you should take if you're playing Sword and Shield in a kill squad, because there's so many to choose from, and there's so many that pair differently together with the rest of your group. So yeah.